Well, thank you for coming to this session on multi-site. I think it will, I trust it will be worth your time. I've done this many different times and it just seems to bear fruit every time. So you should have received a packet as you came in. If you did not, grab one in the back. There's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to work through. At the beginning here, I just want to go through the 6 current types of multi-site that are out there. And then I'll get into how to build a launch team and how to really create a multi-site ministry within your church. And so the 6 different types, there's really, in the first 2, you notice there's really 2 types, and then the other 4 that are on here deal with other aspects of multi-site in that way. So we have the first one being video venue or teaching. You have to make that decision. When you're going to do multi-site, are you going to do video venue? And allow it to be broadcast, or some fashion of maybe the 2. I'm a live preacher kind of guy. I believe in just creating an atmosphere where you have live teaching throughout your campuses. It just seems to be millennials are more attracted to that. You have a sense of, it's just, I think it's healthier not have a personality-driven church in that way. So you can see video venue, although it's very popular, it's what really kind of helped multi-site to take off. And then you have the idea of live teaching becoming much more popular. It was like 30% was multi-site that was live teaching back in the day, and it's been rising, and it's going to be over half pretty soon here, where most in the future will be live teaching. But if you see here, then you have the third one, the restart, the adoption, the takeover, healthy conversations, where, frankly, let's just be honest, in the Methodist world, we're going to have a lot of these that are going to come in the future. Tell me your name again. Doug. So Doug and I were just talking. There is a lot of opportunity. I would dare say every one of your ministries at some point, if you go down the road of multi-site, you are going to see a sense of opportunity for taking over a church that is dying. And that's not a bad thing. Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it can't bear fruit. And so this is a good thing, not a put down on them. It's actually a chance. I've done this many different times, worked through a lot of adoption opportunities, and every single time the people that stick with it say, I always dreamed that this building would be filled again. And when they see this new life and the energy that comes from it, there is nothing more enjoyable than to get out of bed each day saying, I get to be a part of this. This is beautiful. And so I hope the adoption process of multi-site, because we are primed in the Methodist world. I'm assuming most of you are Methodist, and if you're in a different denomination, join the Methodists. We're in really good shape right now. So, but we're in a space and place where we have the privilege of really, in some ways, being more collaborative and having an opportunity to be much more connectional than I think we've ever been before. It's a real gift in that way. I've done church planting for many years, really over 20 years now I've been in the church planting world. And I threw away millions of dollars on leadership teams at the parachute drop. You know, the parachute drop where you give money to a pastor, they go into a community that's growing. The success rate for that, 7%. Yuck! You go in deeper into, then we came up with a better plan, the mother-daughter plant. And the mother-daughter is a great idea. It makes sense, you know, let's birth a child. But then what you do is you have a church connected for 3-4 years, and then they take that money and they launch. And the success rate for that is still 40%. I mean, it's high, but it's not that high. Multi-site is 95%. Where you have one church in multiple locations. It's not a 2-point charge. I get that question all the time in Methodist circles. Is it a 3-point charge, 4-point charge? It is not. It is one board. It is the one trustees, one finance. You only fill out paperwork one time every year, you know? It's a good thing with multiple locations. And that's a real gift in that way. And so this idea of restart and the chance to adopt ministries that maybe are having some struggle, there is nothing more enjoyable than watching revitalization. It's not a takeover in the sense that we're destroying you and in colonization like Doug and I were talking about. It's not that. It's a spirit of, hey, we are one body. And if we can help you revitalize again, this is a gift, a real good thing. If you keep looking on that, you'll see the 4th type, and I'm not going to read, because we don't have the time, the advantages and disadvantages, but you can read all this material for yourself later. But the missional model, I love the missional model because this is a great opportunity to send all of your people to become a multi-site, to launch sites. Hey, you could have one in the school. You could have a church that starts to gather in a workspace, and you can go into local YMCA. You can go in all over the place. And so there's great opportunities for looking for missional needs around us. Community partnership would be like finding a local restaurant and then connecting with that owner and then having a worship setting in there, maybe a local bar, just connecting with the community in that way so that you're leaving the four walls of a church building. A lot of these churches are happening all around the country, and it's a great thing. The sixth one, a real common one now as well, is virtual campus, where you now have an online presence while you have live teaching going on. And so you have a campus pastor who's there talking by the computer, and people are connecting in that way. A lot of your churches are probably already doing that, but that's a legit multi-site. So as you look at these six, I would encourage you at some point to have a vision to say, what if we did all six of these? Don't just pick one. Do them all. I'm promising you can do all six. Just have it as a vision in that way. So with that, if you that's just that information you can read for yourself later. That just will help you with your board conversations and things like that. So let's move into, we're going to just fill in the blanks during our hour together around launching a multi-site ministry. 6 things, 6 steps that I've found, and I want to be real clear up front. Multi-site is not a vision statement. I hear it from people so frequently. I say, hey, tell me about your church. Well, we are a multi-site church, and that's all they say about their church. We're a multi-site church. Multi-site is not a vision statement. Multi-site is a tool by which you reproduce your vision. And if you are a church that is struggling to find people right now, you would be wise not to launch a multi-site ministry. Because what multi-site does is it takes the pioneers. It takes the high-capacity people. It takes the people who love to chart the course and dive into this big new adventure. And it takes these people and it sends them to another location. What that does then is it sometimes kills the sending site because you haven't had a natural growth. So multi-site is a phenomenal strategy when you're bursting at the seams. If you have a church that is 80% full, you find yourself adding worship services. You find yourself with people inviting people to your church. If you don't have that, then your first step before any of these steps I'm going to share with you right now, your first step needs to be, let's do a healthy evaluation. Are we healthy enough to reproduce? Because you don't want to reproduce something that doesn't naturally draw people already. And so I hope that doesn't squash any of your fires and excitement. You're like, I'm going to leave now. I'm out of here. But this, hopefully, I just want to save you a lot of pain and suffering in the future by realizing what multi-site is. It is a tool that God uses in a great way to send people as you have a thriving ministry that's growing. Okay? Any questions about that? Does that make sense? I'm sure, hopefully it does. Being in the church planting world for 20-some years, I've been around a lot of church planters, and I'm telling you, anybody who's been in the church planting world, they often say, when I planted churches, parachute drop, mother-daughter, it was just lonely. But now that I'm in the multi-site world, I'm having fun. I love the people I'm with. We do life together. We're collaborating in ways that always felt like that's what I needed all along. It's sort of like I never knew that I needed you until I met you, multi-site. Now that I've met you, I knew I needed you all along. It's that kind of wonderful feeling in that way. Okay, so with that said, I'm just going to take you through 6 steps that I've been doing for many years now, done it in dozens and dozens of different settings. And it's just, again, it's my favorite part of doing life and ministry right now. And I would dare say it's going to be the part of my future in a long time if God so blesses in that way. So the first thing that I constantly challenge around multi-site, you cannot do it without the laity. It is not a clergy-driven movement. It is a lay-driven movement. So to stand in front of the congregation and say, you know, I need you. I need you to look at your community. What I often do is I'll do demographics. You use Mission Insight or something like that, and you study around your neighborhoods and you look at where your people currently are located. We call it cannibalization. You cannibalize your own church. You look at where your people are at. Maybe they're on the southeast side of town, and you're on the northeast side, maybe you're northwest side, and you've got some people driving 15, 20 miles to church because they love their church family. But you notice there's several people over in this pocket. Maybe you've got 10, 15, 20 families, and you say, boy, that's a growing area. There's a lot of energy in that area. I would love to see, what if we planted a community in that location? And so at that point, you take and you launch and you say, I would love to consider the idea of planting a church in this direction. If you're interested, I'd love to have you attend a meeting. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But to say to the laity, this ministry is all about you. Our future is as successful as you get involved in the ministry. It's that Ephesians 4 concept, so Christ himself gave the apostles. Every one of you in this room are either an apostle, a prophet, an evangelist, a shepherd, or a teacher, that APEST model of the fivefold ministry. Every one of you, I don't think you'd be at a conference like this if you're not one of these 4 or 5 people. And in this, our job then is to equip his people for the works of service so that the body of Christ may be built up. Our job is to equip others. I shared yesterday in one of my sessions, my DS years ago said, the day you got ordained was the day you stepped out of ministry. The day you got ordained was the day you stepped out of ministry. When I heard that, I was like, whoa, that's shocking, but that's biblical. Our job, if you're in any form of leadership within your church, is to equip and train others for the work of ministry. And so I take that very seriously, and for the past 15 years of my ministry, all I think about every day when I wake up, I say, Lord, help me to train the people that you've given me to care for and to shepherd the very best I can. And so everything we're going to talk about today is really all about training them up, equipping them, setting them up for success in that way. And so I've said things publicly. All revivals that have happened in Christian history have happened because lay people have gotten involved in ministry. And so I'll say, we're going to be going to the southeast side of town. I'll show a picture up on the map and on stage and say, we're going to be going in this area. And if you happen to live in this area, you know someone who does, I'd love to have you come to an informational meeting. This is going to be a chance to get out of this location and reach people that never, never, never would step foot in the building here in this location. So we're going to go to them. We no longer live in the days where you can open up the doors and assume people are just going to pop in. They don't do that anymore, so we need to go to them. In fact, the whole concept of the Great Commission, go, and that's a participle. Jesus says, wherever you are going, as you're doing life in your community. So we want to go to your community. And if you live in this area and you're interested in this, we'd love to have you come and participate. I've never had people not attend this kind of a calling. They hear this and it's like there's something that awakens inside of them. It's that calling that you once received when you felt the tap on your shoulder, and you hear that gentle whisper of the Spirit say, I am calling you to be that missionary. And people just come alive. There's nothing more exciting than watching people say, I feel like I can't believe God is using me. What a gift this is. And so inspire them, call them in that way. The second thing that then I'm challenging you to do is set the bar high. If you look at the fill in the blank that we're going through, so during the informational meeting, as the people have been called together, I just show them, here are some of the things that I lay out at that informational meeting. One, I reveal the campus pastor. Usually it's a lay pastor. Rarely do I have somebody who's appointed by the bishop. Mainly because, one, we're in clergy crisis. There's not a lot to choose from. And two, frankly, a lot have been tainted. The system has either jaded them, frustration, they've got their own agenda. You oftentimes under multi-site, then it's very important for me not to have somebody who's from the outside, because then if they get a new site over here, they may have a different vision than the church has. And now you have polarization happening. So almost always, I in fact, have had some conversations with some multi-site gurus that are out there, and had one who said, I'd rather shoot myself in the head than bring somebody in from the outside. I don't care how hotshot they are, Because if they're a hot shot, they're going to end up getting people, and they'll become a renegade, and they'll end up fighting you all the way. And so to find somebody from within, to train them up from within, it's beautiful. And that is how we're going to feed the clergy crisis anyway for years to come, from training within. So I've truly launched dozens of pastors into the system through the years, because it's just so rewarding to watch people who have had the call on their life. And when I heard this stat years ago, and probably the stat's even bigger than this now, but this was about 10 years ago, I heard the average age of a pastor, first time in the pulpit, 49 years old. And we can always, none of you would go, I'm shocked by that, because 49 years old, that's kind of young. That's a young whippersnapper, I knew that we were in trouble when we said young adults are now, 42. I'm like, that's not a young adult anymore, but we keep increasing what a young adult looks like. But 49, and that tells me something. God put a call on somebody's life in their 20s. They got afraid. Maybe they got jaded by something in our system, and they ran away. They went to the marketplace. And then they found out, there's still that burden in my heart. And then they hear their pastor one day say, we're looking to go in this direction, and I'm believing one of you is going to be called to step up and be a lead in this way, to be cared for by our ministry as a campus pastor, but to take some leadership in this way. If this is a calling on your life, I'd love to have a conversation with you. I've never had somebody not respond to that kind of a God moment, those God-ordained moments that are so beautiful. And so I want to challenge you, inspire them, really challenge them in that way. And then as you set that bar high, here's what we do during that meeting. So all these people show up to an informational meeting, and my job during the informational meeting is to cut that room in half. It's John Wesley's concept of, give me 100 people on fire for Christ, and I'll change the world. I don't care if they're lay or clergy. What Wesley was getting at is the on fire. When you have people who are on fire, they're going to go somewhere incredibly far. And it's Amos 3:3, where Amos, it says in there, when two people walk in agreement, that word in the Septuagint is actually symphoneo. When two people walk in symphoneo, symphony, two distinct sounds, they're unique people, but they come together to make better music together. When two people walk in symphoneo, they go further together. That's what happens in these moments of multi-site, where you pull these people together, and here are some of the things that we make them commit to. And they have to sign a committed letter. And we say, I will stay engaged through the duration of the launch season. I'll talk to you about that in just a minute. I will pray for and connect with the community. So if you're not from that community, I don't want you. If you don't love that community, I don't want you just joining on this launch team because, yay, hard, church is doing something fun. I want you to want to die for those people. If you love those people, they will feel it and it will grow. And so you need to pray for and connect with the community. In other words, will you spend money there? Will you shop there? Get to know the people there? I will submit to, and we put our church name in there, I will submit to the Watermark leadership and its vision so that we're unified. I will volunteer, and this is the scary one, and lead where needed. So I say, if you're on the launch team, you're going to be somebody that I'm going to trust as a leader. I'm going to train you at a higher level than I train others. I'm going to treat it like a boot camp. You matter to me, and your future matters to me, and I want you to succeed in ministry. And then we have fun with it, like another one. And I have 7 or 8 sometimes. This is just my most recent one. I'll laugh at all the pastor's jokes, even if they're not funny, just to let them know, hey, I'm not just going to be a jerk the whole time, but I want to set the bar high, I will still laugh, and we will still have fun. But in some ways, I want to scare the group, the riffraff away. And here's the psychology behind it. If somebody just wants to jump on because it's the fun next new thing the church is doing, or they want to get away from you, I see that a lot, because you'll be at the sending site, I can get away from you because you've turned me down for these things that I've wanted to do, and or we've had confrontation. And so it's, in the church planting world, we call it the granola, the nuts, the fruits, and the flakes. There are a lot of granola in the church planting world. And sometimes the granola will join the launch team. Here's the danger of not calling it out at the beginning and setting the bar high. If you don't set the bar high, as you go through the launch training, you will have attrition as the weeks go on. And you're going to watch a room of 40 turn into 30, turn into 20, turn into 10. And you get into the launch season and you have 10 people left, you have negative momentum. I would much rather have it go from 40 in an informational meeting down to 20, and now I get to work with my 20. That's 8 more than Jesus had to change the world, so I'm going to give them all I've got and watch these 20. Imagine if each of them take the launch training seriously. You now have 20 church planters instead of just one church planter in the parachute world. You see, I'll talk about it in just a minute. When we get into the training, I train them as planters. So now you have exponential networking happening in the community. You're going to push back on me on this, but I'm telling you, the stats show every time I've done it this way, the launch team ends up reproducing itself, getting larger, and every time we've launched, some of you won't believe this, but it's true. I can give you lots of people and stories behind it. When we launch, the next weekend is even larger than launch weekend. That's contrary to every other launch that's out there, because what we usually do in parachute drops and stuff, we say, all the Methodists, gather in! And so then you have a false sense of joy the first week. You have 300 people, and then the next week you're down to 75 people. And it kills the morale. But if you have 20 church planters who you've trained, and every one of them feel the weight, and I'll talk to you about that as we get to point number 3 and 4. If they feel the weight of pressure on them like a church planter typically does, then you've got an energy and people that are willing to go to the ends of the earth to reach people for Christ and for your local church in that way. See, I mean this point. If you don't get this point right, I'm telling you, you will have the psychology of struggle as your team fades because you said, you got a pulse, come on in. You know, we don't want that. We don't want that, okay? So really setting that bar high. And number 3, which leads to number 3. So during that meeting, then, I clearly communicate the timeline. Clearly communicate the timeline. So here's what I do for a timeline. Again, as I go through this is just what I've been doing. I would challenge you to do your uniqueness of your church and what works for you. This is just an example for you, but we believe in a 4-phase launch strategy. Phase 1 is the launch team recruitment. And because I'm in the north, and a lot of you probably Pennsylvania, in the north, just because of the weather and the winter, we really work around the September through November is a really prime time to start grabbing people in this. And so we use the fall as the launch recruitment time. So every weekend I'll maybe mention something about the new site that we're dreaming, maybe every other week, maybe once a month. But I'll say we're building up for this big launch training, and I want to have you come to these informational meetings. And I'll give 4 or 5 informational meetings. It's not just one and done. You use the entire fall to recruit. As you're in conversation with any of the people who have already signed the dotted line, I'm committed to be a launch team member. That day, I will say, now I want you to find 2 other people that are going to join you on this launch team. So right away, they're already starting to network and strategize. One thing I didn't mention about setting the bar high, I actually tell our launch team, I would prefer that you don't do extracurricular community events just during the launch phase. The reason, I want your laser focus on this alone. You can be on the PTA next season. You can coach softball next year. But as far as it can be with you, your extracurricular time, give it to the church. And when I talked in point 1 about inspiring the laity, one of the things I've often quoted is Tony Campolo. When Tony said he did a study years ago on 100 people who were 95 years or older. Some of you have maybe even preached this. It was such great teaching. And he said the top 3 answers of these people when they were asked one question, if you could live life over again, what would you do differently the next time? Their top 3 answers were almost identical. They said, number 3, we would reflect more. Number 2, we would risk more. And their number 1 answer, if they could live life over again, I would do more that matters beyond the grave. Because I'm realizing I gave my whole life to my company, and the day I retired, they replaced me just like that. And it feels like everything I did was wasted. But I want to get to my deathbed and say, I invested my life into something that's going to last way beyond me. And I can't think of a greater investment than the church. It's the one thing that will last forever. And so why not invest your life in it? So during these 18 months, I'm asking you, give me all you've got. You can go back. We want you to be missional. We want you to be in the community. But there's a season for all things in that. And this is a season where I need your full undivided attention. Studying leadership, studying multi-site concepts, studying the community. I want you to do cultural exegesis. I want you to know this community backward and forward. I'll get to that in just a second. But when people hear that, it inspires them up. It sets the bar high. And that's what I'm doing during phase 1 of recruitment. For those 3 months, I did this literally just last fall, and now I'm launching October 6th. Pray for me. We have another site that's being launched down in a movie theater, and I just went through this process again this year. Number 2, phase 2, is the launch team training, and I'll talk about that in just a second on point number 4. So I'll hold with that. And this lasts in our cycle from January to May. And that's heavy training. I train them like clergy. I put on my seminary professor hat, and I love it. And I overwhelm them with teaching and training and homework. I set the bar high for them, and I'm telling you, it bears fruit. Phase 3. This is during the summer months, May, maybe June, July, August. I'm currently in this phase with my current launch team in Springville, south of where I'm at in Buffalo. This is community, we're missional and marketing phase. This is where we're training people up and to reach out to the community. We do prayer walking during this time. We do just for them events. I'll talk about the marketing on point 6, so I'll come back to this. But during this phase, we're doing heavy marketing throughout the community. This is when we do the blitzkriegs of all the social media, any media that we do in mailboxes. Believe it or not, mailboxes work again because people are so sick of getting bills only in their mailbox now. So it's kind of cool to say, we're your new neighbors. How can we bless you in that way? And then phase 4 is the launch season, which is during the next 6 months. Usually we launch in September, October, never much later than early November, because you want 6 or 8 weeks before Christmas to get some momentum under your belt. So October is pretty much my launch month. And we then use the next 6 months where people are very committed in that way. So when I say to somebody, I want you to give me all you've got for 18 months, this is an 18-month process. So right post-launch, they're committed for 6 more months. So some people are going to say, I can give you 18 months, and then I may go back to the sending site. Notice, by the way, I haven't said main site. Main is a 4-letter word. Always say sending site or some other word. We call it the McKinley campus. That's because it's on McKinley Avenue, McKinley Parkway. And so people know where it's at. And then we've got our Springville location, South Creek, which is right on South Creek. And then we've got our Bayview site as well, which is on Bayview Road. So those sites are known geographically. And so we say our McKinley site, which has 1,600 to 1,800 people on the weekend, we would think, oh, this is the main site. No, it's the site where we send people from because it's our biggest location, so that's how we do that in that way. So sometimes people will give you 18 months, and then they'll maybe come back to another site or location. That's the beauty of multi-site. We can care for one another because it's one church, happen to meet in different locations. Does that make sense? Okay. Any questions as we get to point 4? This is fun. This is so fun. I challenge you to clearly communicate the timeline. Tell people this is what you can expect from me. I'm going to give you all I've got. I'm asking you, give me all you've got as well. Okay. Number 4, train them as pastors. Train them as pastors. Now this is critical because you don't want to just treat them like and I've said this yesterday, I'll say it in our next session as well, but when we send out and delegate out, delegation literally is not, you should not delegate task. You should delegate authority. Do you see the difference? If you delegate a task, then all you're doing is, I'm training you to do my bidding. Now I've got followers. I don't want followers. I want leaders. So I delegate authority. So as I train them as pastors, you'll see in a minute how I discover who they are. Once I discover who they are, then I can actually say, I'm going to give you the authority to be the head of our hospitality at this campus. What? I can't do that. Then they rise up. You train them. I expect you to be a shepherd, a pastor, a caregiver over this area that I've given you authority. When you do that, they come alive in so many ways in this way. So if you'll just flip your fill in the blanks and you go to the academy, let me take you through what we do then. In the wintertime, we go through then, as you can see, what we did this year for Watermark, we went every other week for the most part. And each of the phases were kind of developing and growing. Doug was asking me earlier about takeovers and the challenges of takeovers because it feels like colonization. If you have a dying church and then you come in and the bishop or the cabinet, maybe the DS has said, hey, would you be willing to take over this church over here and adopt them? Then you almost feel like you're the big bad wolf coming in saying, I'm better than you are. So what we do is, what we did in this case, we had a church that was dying and they approached us and said, would you consider making us one of your sites? And so what we did was the very first session was God is already here. We had all the leaders share stories. We put a video together. We heard the bigger picture of the ways in which God has been here for that church. Was there for 15 years. We heard 15 years of stories. A church I did in Grand Rapids, 110 years old, and they just went through and they told story after story and tears were flowing, and it was in some ways a funeral. In many ways it was a ceremony of honoring their legacy, and we were learning because we said, God's already here. It's not that you failed, it's just that it's the next life cycle to come along. And so those who hang in there through all of that get to see the revitalization. And so I've seen sites so many times where it's 10, 20, 30 people that are left, and now you have a new launch team that comes in. You bring new life in there. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then it takes off and starts to grow in tremendous ways. And so first session. So during these sessions, I'll take you through what we do. The first thing that we do is so the session every time goes for an hour and a half, just 90 minutes. You leave them wanting more, you go fast, you honor their time, and you make every minute count during the launch season. Okay, so for us in this case, we went every other week. Some launch seasons I went where I did 3 trainings in a row and then 1 off, 3 on, 1 off, because I want people to have breathing room. I want them to have time to process. And I found a better rhythm is every other week so that you have a chance to breathe and do the homework between each of the sessions. And so we have an accountability update. What this usually is let's talk about homework. Let's hear what you did from what you learned last time. If you fail in this, all you're going to do is have a bunch of people that say, entertain me. I just want, but if you hold them accountable, then they feel sweaty. They feel the sweaty palms, their heart racing. They feel like, I'm going to be held accountable to this, and I've already set an agreement that I'm going to be a part of all this. They treat it like a seminary class. They treat it like real training. So there's just a real passion in that way around this. Then what we do, that's about 15 minutes where we have a chance for accountability. The next 15 minutes is a chance for us to get to know the community. What's their name is one of the segments. If you think of like Jimmy Kimmel or a late night talk show, they do these segments. Like this is the what's their name segment. So at this point, I'll around the room say, tell me about somebody you have met in the community this week. Somebody will say, yeah, I've just got a new hairdresser. I'd encourage you all to go there. Then we start to look like a cult because you have the same, all these people start attacking the same young lady, or whatever. I just met this new waitress. She's fantastic. Or this guy that I just met, I'd love for all of us to start praying for him. And they're calling these people by name. Then we'll just start praying for these people by name. What we're doing is we're creating an atmosphere where these people are learning all of these different names of people, and they're learning in a concept. I have to start thinking about these people and getting to know these people in this way. And so the what's their name is a huge thing in that way. The next one is then we do a core teaching. Another thing with the what's their name, we brought in the mayor of the town, we bring in the school board member, we'll bring in a business leader from the community. All these people that come in, the whole purpose behind it is to get to know the community in that way. Then we have this core teaching time where I'll literally teach on whatever the segment is, or the campus pastor will teach on these segments. So let's look at how it goes if you look back at the academy. So we have, at first, we had the funeral the first week, the way to honor the ministry from before. Then we look big picture, the marks of a healthy multi-site. Then we look at leading yourself, leading others, healthy communication, understanding your structure and understanding what it means to be a part of our church family. This is where I bring in all the leaders and we have a chance to all talk together. Common fails in multi-site, the secret weapon. I gave you my email. You can feel free to email me and I can send you this academy, all this material I've written up, and you can just take it and run with it. It'll give you a good platform to start building some material in this way. A lot of this came out of my doctorate research, and as I was really learning how to identify, how do you identify, train, and send lay people for multi-site. So that's where a lot of this came from. So you can get all this material if you would like it. Secret weapon for a successful launch, and then celebration day. And so as you go through all this, you have a time of teaching, usually 30 minutes of teaching around the topic. And then we break out for 20 minutes into groups of 5 or 10, and they have a chance to answer one question from the night. And the question's real specific. If we're on the issue of conflict, we address that issue and we bring up that particular topic. Or leading yourself. Which of these concepts that you just heard define you? And then what happens is the person gets used to talking and learning from others and sharing their thoughts, and it really bonds the team together. Then we have the final segment, which is just 10 minutes, where we come together back in the room together and we hold hands and we pray facing out. And then the campus pastor or myself will stand in the middle and we say, I've got your back. We're in this together. And I'm praying, right now you're facing in a direction where there is somebody in this community that hates God because they've been hurt by the church, they've been hurt by some Christian, and they just aren't open to the things of God right now. But our church is here for them. And so as you're facing them right now, let's just pray for them. And so I will pray over the community in that way. And so it's really a powerful moment when you're in a circle all facing out. We end all of our meetings that way because it creates an atmosphere of we're going and launching in this way. So that's some of the training. Let's lead. I'll pause. Questions about that? Yes.
So you have this launch team together that you've set the bar high for.
Yes.
And all of these folks have signed, they're going to do this.
Yes.
What happens in the process when you have 1, 2, or more who drop out? How do you replace them? Because you need that segment. I mean, you do. Your team around that segment.
You do. Rarely do people drop out because you've set the bar high at the beginning, and especially by having them sign an agreement, then most people just stick. If somebody drops out, it's because they move. They're moving out of the community. They're moving out of state. Sometimes illness. I've not had people drop out because they don't agree with where we're going. That's why I say point 2 is so important. Set that bar high when they agree to it. You'll get attrition for whatever reason just because of everyday life, but it's very small, 5%. If you have 20, 30%, then there's something wrong with the system of not inspiring them in, or maybe not setting the bar high initially. Because when you ask people for their commitment, if they leave, I don't freak out because I'm saying, well, obviously I don't want them on this team if they're not going to be fully engaged in that way. So it's rare. It's a small number. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes, but if that happens, for whatever reason,
I don't panic about it. Just let them go.
So, but how do you feel, because you need that person there?
Yeah.
So how do you feel that? Do you just go out and find someone else? Hey, we got a vacancy.
Maybe I miscommunicated. I never have a set number. I never say it's capped. One thing I should say, people start joining throughout. because I'm getting my launch team to already invite people. And so it's an open-ended training. We video all of the sessions, so people that come in late, even the last week, can still just get downloaded material, because we want it to be open-ended, continuing to grow. Yep, so it's a fluid dynamic in that way. But it's a real bonding. Usually it's really just a group, solid group of people that just hang in there together, and it grows by a little bit, maybe shrinks because of people's life circumstances, but overall it's a pretty solid core team in that way. So, but I like the idea of fluidity in that way. I really do. Others? Okay, number five. Identify their unique shape. Now, this is Rick Warren stuff from years ago. Still works like a charm. I can go through it pretty quickly, but if you go to that sheet on identifying your shape, this is what we actually hand them. This is in the material. I can send it to you if you send me an email. But this identifying your shape is literally the old Rick Warren stuff from years ago. The shape stands for, it's an acronym for spiritual gifts, heart. I'll put it all up quickly, then I'll explain them all quickly. A is ability, the P is personality, and the E is experience. So SHAPE is an acronym saying everybody that we will ever meet, a Christ follower has a God-given shape. They have a call on their life with their spiritual gifts. They have a heart passion. They have an ability. You have God-given abilities that your brain is wired in a beautiful way. And so we want your ability to be uniquely shaped for kind of to what we were just asking about when you lose a team member. You lose a unique shape, and so you want to replace that person if you can. The P is personality. You have unique personality types. You have, the DISC assessment. You understand that there's some people that are introverted, those that are extroverted, some that like to go fast, some that like to be right. There's a variety of people. And then the experience. Every one of us has different experiences. So everybody on that launch team has a different shape. And so with that, then let's go through these pages. So I will teach them, or the campus pastor will teach them that week around spiritual gifts, and then heart, ability, personality, and experience. Then what they do is they get this packet of material. And so for spiritual gifts, we don't believe in spiritual tests because there's no uniformed person out there. We believe you find your spiritual gifts not by taking a test online. You can do that, and it can give you somewhat of a result. But the best way to find your spiritual gift is to serve. And as you serve, you look at where you bear fruit. So I ask them, where do you bear fruit? As you look at this material, cross out any of the places where you maybe don't see fruit in your life. So under gifts that communicate God's Word, preaching, evangelism, missions, apostleship, cross off or circle any that pertain to you. Gifts that educate God's people, teaching, encouragement, wisdom, discernment, knowledge, all these scripturally. Cross off or circle where you bear fruit. On the back side, same thing. Gifts that demonstrate God's love, gifts that celebrate God's presence, and the prayer-related gifts. Now, these are, of course, not exhaustive, but this is a pretty solid list from Scripture. And so circle or cross out. Then we'll go to the next one, and we'll go to the A, or the H. And so the H is for your heart's desire. Now again, these are not exhaustive, but I'll say cross off or circle. Where does your heart come alive? Where are you wired for passion? Circle and cross off any of these. Then we go to the next page on the back with ability. Again, not exhaustive. Circle or cross off any that don't pertain or do pertain. Then the most important sheet. We actually print this on cardstock. I'll take it and tear it right off. This is actually cardstock that I hand out to every single person during that training. They then give me their own assessment of what they've gone through from that night, and this is part of one of their week's homework. So then they give me their top 3 spiritual gifts. They give me their heart passion, people I like to work with, abilities, personality type, experiences. This helps me to really get to know that launch team member well. The campus pastor will then meet with all of them and go through this with them, and they will assign and find places and roles for them to take authority. Remember, we don't delegate tasks. I don't say, stand at the door and hand out bulletins. I say, you're in charge of hospitality. Go, girl, go. You do what you do best, because I don't do it very well. I'll just give handshakes and ignore some people that tick me off, you know. You will show hospitality in great ways. So I'm giving you the authority. Now everything that happens with hospitality is yours in this campus. And you just watch people creatively come alive. And so if they're in the kids area, they then will be under the authority of the kids director over the full church. If they're in outreach, they'll be under the full outreach leader, and that person now works with them. So now I send to our leaders of our church, here are some new leaders of these campuses. So then our leaders, because I tell our staff, you're paid to think, you're not paid to do the work of the ministry. Your job is to strategize, think, work with the people who get to do the work of the ministry based on their shapes in that way. So now you're going to ask me the question, because I hear this question all the time. Well, okay, what if you don't have somebody that wants to work with kids or doesn't want to do small groups? Then we wait till that person comes. The only thing we have to launch with is kids ministry and music, and of course preaching. So I will pay a college student for a while to do kids ministry until I find somebody who has a passion for it. I'm not just going to put a warm body in there. I wait until God raises up somebody who has a calling and a holy disturbance for that ministry. So here's the deal. All of our campuses look differently, but they have the umbrella of the same leadership, so they take on the DNA of our church. They've been trained by the same leaders of the church, so there's a caregiving aspect over that in that way. So we have really a shape that happens in that way. So this is a critically important piece of paper, because then you have a chance to sit down with them, really help them find their unique lane for ministry. Like one neat one that just came up in this most recent one, I thought, oh, we got this guy that's a huge finance guy for this bank. And I was so excited he was on the launch team. And I was like, yes, that's going to be great. We've got our finance department in for this campus to be able to report all that comes out of here. And he said, that's not my shape. I do that to make money in real life. But honestly, I want to work with kids. And so if we didn't have that conversation, I would have just put him in a place where I pigeonholed him instead of that wonderful conversation that led him to an area where he now dresses up like Daffy Duck and has all this, you know, and does all this fun stuff. And so that's his unique shape. And so that is critically important. There's nothing more enjoyable than watching all these people now come alive in their unique shape and giftedness in that way. And then the last one, and then we'll wrap up. We've just got 10 minutes here. Send them strategically. Send them strategically. So I want to give you some examples of how we do this during the launch season. In fact, I'm doing that over the next 5 weeks. Literally, I'm living out point 6 right now as we speak. So it's really fun with our current launch team going down to Springville. But I want to tell you, one of the greatest things about sending strategically is that when you jump into multi-site world, here's the blessing. If your church is 1 to 3 years old, it takes 2 people to bring 1 person to church. Any of you ever experienced that before? You literally have all these people that are so excited. Come check out my brand new ministry. And so a lot of people are inviting people in the early days of your church. Research shows that between 3 and 5 years old, 17 people are needed in your church to bring 1 person to your church. When you get to 5 to 10 years old, it's 72 members to bring 1 person to church. Because everybody's bored now. We've been here 10 years. It's just we do the same thing. 3 songs, sermon, goodbye. Whoa, oh. But get this. So when you go over, so some of your churches are 100 years old. That's 1.2 billion people to bring 1 person to... You can see that coming, no doubt. The beauty of multi-site. And so I'm living through it right now. I'm in a church that's 62 years old. But we're launching a site October 5th, October 6th. And that is deeply exciting for us as a church because we go back to 0. Everybody in the church now are talking about Springville. Did you hear what we're doing? We just tore out all these, we're showing pictures each week, what's the progress of the campus and all that. And so it's been wonderful. Let me show you how we send our launch team strategically. And if you've already launched a team, you could still start doing this stuff right now. And because we forget some of these things. This is what my very first one, so this is nostalgic for me, but years ago when we launched our first one in Grand Rapids where I was at in Cornerstone, this is what we had all of our team members sign. As a member of the Cornerstone Heritage Hill launch team, I am committing to a lifestyle of investing and inviting. A lifestyle. I'm going to spend the rest of my days investing in people and then inviting them to Jesus and inviting them to the church. So we have them date it and sign it. Then they come up and they get prayed over and commissioned by the campus pastor. And there's tears every time. I've been through this 5, 6 different times now, and every single time there are tears in the room because people need that anointing, that commissioning, that I believe in you kind of blessing. It's gorgeous and it's fantastic. So we do that in May or June, and we commission them saying, okay, now during the summer, we want you to invest in people and invite them. Here are a bunch of cards to hand out. We give a lot of promo kind of material. New church coming in September, new church coming in October. It creates a buzz in the community. Another thing that we've done is called It's on Us. And we do this frequently. You go to a local pizza place, a local hamburger shop, and you buy out the hours from 7 to 9 at night or 5 to 7. We will pay for everybody's meal. Instead of spending $10,000 on a billboard, we put $10,000 into the local restaurant. This restaurant owner loves us. But then we have these cards, just 3x5 cards, and people go, I'm here to pay. And then they go, no, it's on them. And they're like, what? Who's paying for my meal? And they say, oh, that person's standing over there. They're just new to the neighborhood. They're a new church, and they just want to bless you. And so it's on us. And so they just put that card on the pizza box as people walk out, and they stop in and start having a conversation. We've had dozens of people through the years just connect with the church in the early days of the launch time. You could do this at any season, frankly. You don't need to do it during just launch season, but I'm just teaching right now on how to launch effectively. We also do, we will then have our launch team, if you have a multi-site right now, we send our launch team to each of our locations. So right now I have 3 locations, and we have this new location coming in October. Last week, the new campus pastor for Springville was preaching at our South Creek campus, and the launch team showed up to South Creek. And so while Pastor Keith was preaching, everybody got excited saying, hey, I didn't even realize this is great. You're fantastic. In fact, my wife likes him better than me. And so she may end up joining that launch team. He's a great preacher and just a great-hearted man. His launch team was there too, so then we have them come up front and we pray over them. And then I ask the congregation, right now, pull out your phones, take a picture of this moment, Facebook it, Instagram it, tweet it out. Let people know what's happening in your church. That's worth its weight in gold. Way better than any marketing I've ever done. You have all these people taking pictures of this moment, posting it all over Facebook. It's fantastic. And so then he'll go to, next week he's going to be at my McKinley location, and then the next week after that at Bayview. Each time when he's at these and if you only have one site right now, you have a launch team, they just are before the church. And as a church you say, all the launch team members come up. I want the entire church. Now put your hand out and facing these people, let's pray over them, and you anoint them, you bless them in that moment, and the whole church is joining in the moment. We also look for ways to continue to tell the stories. So we will, during the time of an offering, we'll talk about, hey, this is what we're doing as we go to this community. Did you know that in this community there are X number of people that are hurting? The demographics say this, and you give people facts about the community that you've been learning during the launch season. People fall in love with the community and say, I want to know more about that community. You now have all of your people looking in that direction, caring for that community. There's nothing like it. That is why multi-site is 95% successful, because you have the better together mentality. And so it's exciting. It is worth your energy and all the work that goes into it. I've got just a couple of minutes. I spoke most of the time. Let's end with questions, thoughts. What does this stir within you? Again, thank you for being here, because each of you represent thousands of people that could be a part of our church family in the future by you having the courage to go into those local neighborhoods and communities around you. Anything that didn't make sense or needs some clarification?
what is the role of district superintendents in encouraging and identifying possibilities for multi-site?
100% helpful. Very, very helpful. So if they identify some area of need, that collaboration, I've been grateful to DSs through the years because they really are, they have the feet on the ground and they're hearing what's happening, and they've often sent needs our way. So critical, the DS's role is critical, truly, yeah.
When you are looking for new site pastors,
yes,
for those who are maybe from your own church,
mm-hmm.
What is that discernment process like for you, and what are you looking for out of those site pastors?
So a site pastor, I look for 3 different things. When somebody comes to me and they say, I have a call to be in a church planter, I will first check to make sure they believe in the vision of our church. If they don't, then they're going to plant an autonomous church. And I will say, here's money, go plant a parachute drop, because you are a lead pastor. You are not a campus pastor. So submission to the vision. If a person has deep submission to the vision and you can tell they just love the local context of your ministry, then that is the person who becomes a campus pastor for me. You know, so submission, submission, submission. You know, you can tell if they love your ministry or not. And all you do is you get them in the room. And so during the launch year, I give the campus pastor keys to the kingdom. Literally, I say, you can come to any meeting in this church at any time, full keys to the kingdom. And so I get to cross paths with them a ton. And if they're not with you, it will leak eventually. They can only fake it for so long. And then I'll have the tough question and say, it seems to me you have more of a real lead role, apostle calling on your life. What if we revisit this campus pastor idea? Because I think you'll get frustrated under my leadership because you seem like you have a different vision. You know, that will come up as you give them keys to the kingdom. So the only meeting they cannot be in is if it's a staff parish meeting that we're talking about them. You know, but other than that, I consider them a top dog leader in that way. That's a great thing.
How do you measure success in the end?
If that church can become self-sustaining. His question, how can you measure success? 2 things. Will they need to become self-sustaining, meaning they fund themselves, right? Secondly, they plant another site. We say that to our launch team. You'll see it in the material if you receive it from me. That material set, I'm sure it's in there because we say it every single time. You are only successful in our eyes if you birth a child, because we want to be a generational church in that way. So you will be able to reach the more northern communities that we can't reach in the southern part of town. But if we plant you in the middle of town, you're going to be closer to the northern, so that's our goal. You can just keep like a spider's web. You see why this is just made for the Methodist world in this way. We're just set up for it.
So then, with your multi-sites, you're having those campus pastors preaching?
Yeah, I believe in the live preaching, absolutely. So I do collaborative preaching, yeah.
So collaborative preaching, is that they're preaching a sermon that's sort of handed to them?
Thank you for that question. Yep, so what we do is bring them all together, and we will put together the outline together. Collaborative team. I meet with them every Monday for 3 hours, and we look 12 weeks out. Okay? And 12 weeks out then, we will start to write the outline, and we will say to them, do you all agree with this outline as it is? Then the writer, sometimes me, sometimes one of them, will write it over the next 4 weeks. 8 weeks out, we will read the manuscript, and then we say, can we all agree to this? Any tension? If we all agree to it, it's locked in. 8 weeks from now, you've had 8 weeks to live it out. Now preach it. And it works like a charm. It's so much fun. I will, even if multi-site fails somewhere down the road, I'm going to be a collaborative preacher for the rest of my life because I've become a phenomenally better preacher by your ideas, that synergy that comes from that. And what we do, even in addition to that, is once a month, we meet with the board chair, staff parish chair, any of our leadership teams, our kids ministry, and we meet in one room for 2 hours, and we talk about a year from now, what would we want to preach preach for a series. Great example of this. In September, last year, we were sitting there, and I wanted to do a series on idol worship. And we all were there. It was September. We were saying, a year from now in September, what would we like to preach on? And I said, idol worship would be great. And we were calling it Gods at War, small g. And I was like, that'd be great. And then we all said, how do we feel right now in September? And we were like tired. We're getting our kids off to school. We're frazzled. We don't want to be shamed at the beginning in September. What do we feel? We feel chaos. So let's next year. And so this September, we're literally doing a thing we're calling it Picture Day. What can go wrong? And just have fun with the school environment. So we're literally, if you look on our website, we're launching Picture Day this weekend, starting in September. We're advertising it right now. And that came a year ago. So if you're meeting once a month to talk about a year from now, instead of going away for 3 weeks trying to come up with all years of sermons, we do it just once a month for 2 hours. And our team just methodically, then for those 2 hours, we look at, okay, this is the plan for the entire year. Do we disagree? We change a few ideas. But then when we get to the 12 weeks out, we already have been talking about it for 8 months, so that we get to it, we're like, I can't wait, we're about to write Picture Day, we're so excited. And so that material's all written now, and we're ready to launch it full steam. So that's how we do it collaboratively. I actually do tons of lectures on that issue alone, so it's hard to answer quickly, but that's a huge, huge topic. I love it so much. A lot of material quickly. Thank you for receiving this. Let me pray over your ministries. Lord, I thank you for the fruit that's going to come out of this place. I thank you for each of these ministries. I pray for the campus pastors that are going to come out of this room. I pray for the campus pastors that will be identified because of the leaders in this room. I thank you for the lay people who are going to come alive again in the church because of the people in this room, inspiring them to rise up into ministry. And so I just thank you, God, for the ministry that is going to be birthed, all the creative ideas that are about to be launched, because this group of people here just took some time to process and think through, what if we become deeply into the multi-site world? So I pray, God, for each of their campuses to launch successfully, to launch with life and vitality, that each of those communities will flourish because of the presence that is brought because of these leaders here in this room. I pray your blessing upon them. In Jesus' name, amen.